January at the movies was a month of Oscar darlings with one big loud musical remake interrupting it all in the middle. But Tom, as we get kicked off here on our first ever January at the movies. Well, again, like it's going to be different every month. It's not going to be January at the movies every month. It's going to be February,
January at
March.
the movies, the February edition.
Take two, February. No, it's going to be rolling. But yeah, as we get kicked off here on the first of our At the Movies series. It's a new show. We're still figuring out how to say stuff. Tom Pott of the Popcorn Pod. What Oscar winner would you like to see remade in the form of a musical, and how would that look?
That's really tough because it's one you think about like a lot. I actually think about it more. I was gonna say it's one you think about a lot, and then I'm like, no, most people don't, Tom. That's just you. I'm just like, wow, that could be a musical. I'm just thinking Silence of the Lambs. That was the
Ooh.
first one that came to my head. So, like, first of all, you could have a really creepy kind of sound of him kind of going like, remix a bit of that, get that in there, have the Hannibal Lecter dancers, okay, and then you're gonna get all of that, right? Amazing. And first of all, he's going to be dancing in a rotating like Pyrex box on the stage. That's what I'm picturing in my head, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, man, it's coming up to like the halfway point here. They really need to hook us into the second half. What's going to happen? Buffalo Bill. Goodbye, horses. My God, no one in that audience is not coming back having seen that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get
Yeah.
all of that in there. It's just, it would be. Do you know what? I'm actually just, I thought about this enough that I was actually disappointed it's not a thing already. Maybe it is. Maybe some weird college has tried it out. But for me, it's like, man, that's just a layup. You know,
Look,
come on.
This is what we're going to use this show for mainly. It's going to be our movie pitches that we're too lazy to write and build ourselves. But if someone does it, we're looking for 10%. Look, documented evidence that we've called this. Another one that
I'm encouraging people to make it, but also I'm like, oh, get my lawyer on the phone, everybody.
Yeah, please make it so I can sue you. Another one that I plan to take litigation against when this gets made, because it's just irresistible, is The Shape of Water. It's got everything you need here, okay? It's got evil US soldiers. It's got a kooky next door neighbor in the closeted Giles who can have a kind of big emotional number after he gets rejected by the barista. I'm thinking like there's going to be like a tug of war scene of sorts with our heroes, the US scientist and the amphibian man. And like it writes itself. Think of the amphibian man. That is a song title right there. It sounds like something you'd see performed as a best song nominee in the Oscars. And you can even bring in some like mainstream appeal, like bringing some covers and stuff like that in a Glee kind of way, like during the first like sex scene. If you haven't seen it already, there's been enough time, okay? A woman has sex with a fish, all right? And during the first sex scene, you can have like Akon and David Guetta, and this song just came straight to my head, and it's like, damn, use a sexy fish. It writes itself. No, there are challenges. Like the main character is mute, which admittedly not great for a musical setup, but like again, and the other main character is a fish which doesn't speak. So there are challenges here. I'm not saying that it's a perfect fully formed idea, but that's not my problem. That's for whoever wants to make it and then pay me royalties for the idea. So yeah, they're the ones we got. And guys,
I need to jump in and drop our first bombshell of the episode ever. There is a Silence of the Lambs musical.
Holy
dun,
shit.
dun, dun. Silence the musical, a 2005 musical. My goodness. It won some awards. Some musical numbers include I'd Fuck Me, Catherine Dies Today, Put the Fucking Lotion in the Basket, and of course, who could forget If I Could Smell Her Cunt. So yeah, I don't know why we haven't all heard of this one.
I don't remember
anyway.
those quotes from the movie. I think they've gone rogue a little bit on the Silence of the Lambs. That feels
anyway.
Plagiaristic.
But yeah, please don't sue me. I take back everything I said. Don't sue me, please.
Take the 10%. You're fine. Guys, you're very welcome to At the Movies. January at the Movies in this case. And guys, for anyone who's listening in for the first time, which is everyone listening because it's a brand new show, just explain what you can expect. Because if you listened to the season 1 finale of the Page 180 podcast, I spoke about how I wanted to make the show more conversational, focusing on the chats chats and banter that make a podcast great, because a lot of the times when I've been discussing movies, I'd be doing solo reviews and stuff like that, and I want to make it more of a podcast feel. And again, I have just the right person in Tom here, who loves discussing movies just as I do. So what we're going to do is, rather than every week having movie reviews of everything that I've seen, once a month we're going to get together and discuss the movies that both of us have watched, as well as some of our other thoughts about all things kind of Hollywood or movies in general. Like, there can be additional reviews, there can be, if there's movie news or a trailer we want to discuss, we'll make space for discussing it all. We also have a section at the end where we're going to get into rants or maybe spoilers filled discussion, if there's movies out there we want to discuss. We're in Oscar season right now, so that stuff again kind of writes itself. But that's going to be what it is, the run of the mill, and it is like kind of the first. We did a 2023 at the movies podcast, but that was more a recap show. This is the first of a running series that we're going to be back on, and as with any new podcast, we're going to get new ideas, we're going to play with the format, and we're going to see what works and what doesn't work. So we always appreciate your feedback. So if you want to get in touch with the Page 180 socials on Instagram, TikTok, if you want to get in touch with myself on Twitter or Threads, Tom, you can get in touch with that Popcut Pod pretty much everywhere on all socials. So any thoughts you have, or what you're enjoying, or what you want to see more or less of, we're more than open to the feedback. But Tom, I'm ready to talk about some movies. I'm ready to talk about some new releases. How about you?
Hell yeah. I mean, can we talk about how weird January is as a movie season in general first? Would that be
Yes,
okay?
go for it.
So, like, if you're a lot of our culture is obviously coming from America when it comes to movies. We see that kind of discourse online. January is famously known as, by a lot of people, as F you, it's January, because it is the dumping ground often for movies they don't know what to do with. Movies are like, I don't know, it's crap, but people might see it. You know, the cinemas are kind of empty a little bit.
Yeah.
But what's even weirder is that in an Irish context, we also get all these like Oscar nominees. So it's like the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in January, which is always fascinating to me. So I'm really excited to talk January movies because of that.
What a month to start it. So let's get on with it, guys. Let's talk some movies. New release time, and every time on At the Movie Show, we're going to get you started. We're not going to hold you on and like other shows would and create some tension. We're going to get right to it, and we're going to discuss the best movies we've seen this month. And guys, for kind of full clarity, similar to what we did in our 2023 at the movie show just before Christmas, we don't know what the others put, because that's more fun that way. So we don't know what the others can talk about. We haven't shared our thoughts on the various movies we're going to discuss. So Tom, I've no idea what's coming up. We'll start with you. What is your movie of the month for January? And again, just full clarity on this as well. It's movies that are released or like have been screened on a wide scale in the month of January. So movies you can see coming off this. We don't want to do anything that we've seen like sneak previews, or we've got like kind of screeners. He says as if he gets screeners but maybe one day. We don't want to be that kind of frustrating show. It's stuff you can see. Tom, what's your movie of the month?
Well, it's good that you put that disclaimer in there as well, because this was also my movie of last year, but it did not come out in Ireland. I saw it in a film festival, and that is to say my favorite film of January, Poor Things.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Love it. Go for it. What did you like about Poor Things?
Oh my God. I mean, this feels like one of those movies where when you see it, you're like, this is the movie I've wanted. This is the movie I like to think I would make. It is weird. It is surreal. It is actually has a bit of life philosophy to it in a really weird way. And I think it kind of encapsulates life in a strange way, where it's like, oh, learning about the beauty and innocence of the world, people being corrupted, and then the horrid reality of some parts of our life as well is thrown in there for good measure. And I say all that, and it sounds really heavy and pretentious. It is also one of the funniest films I've seen this year. And last year even, I suppose, as well. It was just so twisted, but kind of hilarious. And what is so fun is that seeing this with an audience is such an experience, because I had moments of people gasping, of laughing, of uncomfortable, like, oh, what do we do with it? Like just questioning of themselves.
Yeah.
The performances are amazing in it. Willem Dafoe is like, can always just serve whenever he needs to. He just nails weirdness. I don't know what it is about him. Then we have Mark Ruffalo, who is someone who, like, it sounds kind of disrespectful, but sometimes you forget how good of an actor he is because he just picks random projects, or like, the Hulk, and he's obviously good as the Hulk, but he often doesn't get to show range of the Hulk because it's like, no, when you're angry, you're the Hulk. When you're not angry, just be chill, because people don't want to be confused about your emotions. But in this, he's so hilarious as this kind of smug, snobbish character. Duncan Weatherburn,
Yeah.
love it. And then Emma Stone in this is outstanding. I mean, what an amazing chance for her as an actor to just have such range, because seeing this character develop over the course of the film is what makes it so amazing. And that's what I love. It feels like we're watching a character change so much over time. And that's something I always love about a film. But normally it's like set in stone. It's like the character is this way, they're going to be this way by the end. And you can kind of predict an arc as a result of that. This, it's like, I don't know where this character is going, because the character was such a blank slate at the beginning. The cinematography is really mesmerizing and strange. I thought the production and set design was outstanding. I love the score. It is so weird, and it's even weirder when it gets stuck in your head in like normal situations where you feel like you're on an acid trip or something. Like if you're just walking down the street and you're like dun 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 dun, and you're like, oh my god, help, I need an adult. Yeah, I just think it's a really strange film. That is, I'm going to call it original, even though it is inspired by a book. It feels like a film we don't get very often, because of how weird it is. And I think in that way it should be cherished. I love it. And it's also one of those films that if someone was like, I don't love it at all, I'd be like, that's fair enough, actually. Yeah.
What I loved about this, and yeah, the word I used to describe this is weird. And what I'm loving here is, because I'm a big frequenter of Screen 4 in the Lighthouse Cinema, and that's the weird screen where you're kind of transported into the inner recesses of some absolute weirdo's brain, and you don't know what you're going to see. I love going to see a movie. Now, this wasn't the case with Poor Things, but I love this kind of cinema where I love going to see a movie where I just know I've heard somewhere that the movie's good, and then it's just absolutely bonkers, and I kind of leave like, what have I just watched? But they tend to be very niche. But with this and the likes of Saltburn, which since we last spoke was released on Amazon Prime and took over the world at Christmas, with I
Absolutely.
think everyone and their mother watching it. It feels like weird cinema is kind of back in the mainstream, and I love it. Yorgos Lanthimos, who directed one of my favorite movies of the past few years, in The Favorite. And it's just the one that I just think about it so often. And I think it was 2017 or 18 it was released. Came back and picked up where he left off there for this absolutely madcap. I don't know how you'd even describe it, but I thought of adult fairy tale, like X-rated fairy
Yeah.
tale. It almost is. You've got kind of Emma as the kind of childlike, at least at the start. Bella Baxter, you've got the mad scientist and Willem Dafoe, you've got the perverse and incredible Mark Ruffalo, who stole this movie. I thought he was just hilarious, because it's just, you never, like you say, you never get to see Mark Ruffalo like this. It's the kind of movie, I think, that left me feeling mentally concussed as I left the cinema, trying to wonder what the fuck I just watched, but still thinking about the teams and the scenarios weeks later. And you'd kind of like, I don't think it's just weird at the start. And I think it's Ruffalo who almost grounds it by adding kind of, I don't want to say normal character, because no one in this is normal. You know what I mean? That's not the type of movie that it is, but it's someone grounded in reality, even if it is a perverse reality. And that kind of gives us that's when the movie starts to reveal its hand, and it starts to show us kind of, oh, this is what they're talking about, and so on. And much like The Favorite, I think Lanthimos gives the audience permission to kind of enjoy the rollicking time here, while also being a bit disturbed and triggered by it all. And that's what I love the most about this, that it's inspiring debates. It is really splitting the audience, but it's inspiring debates about the audience. And they're the movies that I love. Like, I think I took it as intended, in that it's an exploration of kind of female, sexual liberation, and how the stigmas, shame, and kind of self-inflicted boundaries that women experience, that kind of inhibit that freedom, are a result of looking at the world and trying to fit in with society's expectations of them, which is something that Bella, because she's kind of raised in this, unique kind of life under kind of Willem Dafoe's mad scientist, she's unaware of. But again, I also feel that you can go into this and be disturbed by it and kind of go, is that a child? Or like, is what's going on here? And like be disturbed and kind of concerned for her and worry throughout that we're almost at times asked to like and support sexually depraved men. It's like
Mhm.
I'd feel okay if you felt that way and it was really uncomfortable. Plus, another benefit, again, this is something that Barbie did and now Poor Things is doing it. It's pissing off really toxic men who are taking it as a full frontal attack, which is always fun. And that's the kind of beauty of interpretive weird cinema that I love, to kind of provoke us, to kind of knock us out of that formulaic slumber that we're kind of used to from watching so many typical Hollywood movies. To get us talking and having these kind of discussions we normally wouldn't have, and to kind of scratch the like the thing I love about it is I kind of think of it as like you're scratching the itch of feelings that we've never been able to put words on previously until you see it acted out. You're like, oh yeah, I've kind of thought that and I felt that way, or I never thought about it that way. Um, I love it. I love the success of the likes of this and Saltburn. And I hope that it emboldens more creators and studios to put money into these original bold projects, because I think there's a lot to like there. But great, coming right out of the bat with a great first pick.
Mhm.
Fair play, Tom. Um, we'll get into my own, because apparently I'm a bit of a World War II buff this month, because for me, my movie of the month was a choice between two movies that move me in two different ways on similar subjects. And I'm going to sneak in and try and talk about both of them, but I will pick one, I promise. But the two similar subjects and the way they tackled them, even though they were in very different ways, were The Zone of Interest and One Life. And like, obviously, look, I can't cheat. I can't pick two movies. So I'm going to go for The Zone of Interest as my January movie of the month, but I'm going to talk about both because I think both succeeded and why I liked them in very un-Oscar season like ways of not being exploitative. Oscar season, like, and when you watch these Oscar darling movies, they kind of revel in making us live in the misery of the moment of other suffering. And when you see this in World War II in particular, you'll see, like, you think of Schindler's List, and there's a lot of really difficult scenes, like Sophie's Choice as well, really difficult scenes that you have to watch people suffer and hammering home their messages in really effective ways. But what I loved about both of these movies was that they chose to respect that the audience are going to know and understand the gravity at play in these situations, and they kept the horrors for the most part off screen. And they approached it in two completely different ways, though. Like with One Life, which for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's James Hawes' retelling of the story of Nicky Winton, an almost kind of British Oscar Schindler type who rescued hundreds of Jewish children from Prague before the Nazi invasion. Hawes chose to make this somehow really uplifting and emotional experience, utilizing Anthony Hopkins' spectacular talent for playing a kind of diddery old man who doesn't want to make a fuss, and sent the audience home in tears. Like, it's one of these movies, the thing I've heard about it constantly is that people just need a moment in the cinema afterwards, and I felt very much that way. But not in the way you'd expect with such a kind of heavy subject matter. But Zone of Interest is my pick. It's just a really eerie, powerful experience, unlike any other that I've seen in the cinema that's covered the Holocaust many, many times. It was released. It's going to be released, by the way. Previews were shown around Ireland over January. That's why we're cheating and putting it in here. But it is released this weekend widely. And it kind of looks at the life of Nazi commandant Rudolf Hoss and his family's life living next door to Auschwitz. Literally, you can see him leave his house and go to work. And then there's that unmistakable view of Auschwitz that we're just unfortunately all too familiar seeing. It's a movie about cognitive dissonance. We're never actually taken inside the camp itself beyond just one scene, which just focuses on Hoss witnessing the horrors at play. Instead, we focus on the mundanity and the ordinariness of their family's life, while in every scene in the background, we can either hear or see the devastation being unleashed next door, and how that either challenges or, more disturbingly, doesn't challenge the characters involved, which again is more unnerving, where they're like, look at these flowers, and you can hear people dying in the background. Sandra Huller continues her stellar work from Anatomy of a Fall. She plays Rudolph's wife, Hedwig, who's the self-titled, horrible name that has aged horrifically, by the way, Queen of Auschwitz, who sees this as a kind of dream existence and everything that they've worked for in their lives, while living in a home that we see at the start of the movie was actually owned by a Jewish family. And for me, what's most scary about Jonathan Glazer's depiction of the family is that they're never overtly portrayed as monsters. Like, you do have Rudolph at times, there is a nod towards certain acts of perversion, but these occur for the most part off camera. And instead, he's merely just an effective bureaucrat by day and loving father by night. And you have Huller's ability to show her mother around the gardens she spends so much time perfecting, while ignoring the soundtrack of anguish screams in the background, is absolutely unnerving. And what really hit me about that is the period that we live in right now, which, you know, to borrow a phrase that gets used widely about subjects like this, the banality of evil. Because while there's like the period of history we're in right now, we're kind of worried about evil people taking over. Donald Trump is threatening to become a dictator with the most powerful country in the world and stuff like that as well. Because there is value to showing us the horrors in Schindler's List, or to showing us downfall and how deranged Hitler was, and pure psychopathic that he was. But for me, it's almost a lot scarier to think of your nice neighbor who could be capable of shrugging off the worst acts in the history of mankind because he might get a promotion or build a nice life for his wife and kids. I've read an interesting review on this from the New York Times, which tore into it as self-aggrandizing. And look, I do get that. There are times where Glazer lets you sit in silence and spooky ambience for long periods of time with nothing but, like, at one stage at the start of the movie, it's just pure darkness for a long period of time. And then there's colors that hit the screen. They just let you think about it and reflect and so on, which again, I could see how people will find that self-indulgent. You've got certain characters who can't ignore the screams and horrors, and we see their moral anguish and acts of defiance portrayed in a kind of black and white thermal vision. Again, it is very showy in that way, it is very arty, but for me, while the New York Times are entitled to their opinion, I feel like it's one that the reviewer is going to revise in time, as the quirks for me came across as really thoughtful jabs to provoke the audience to reflect and take a beat on what they're seeing and think about everything that they've just seen, what it means. And I think that's where the film has its power. I also liked how Glazer leaned on some reality TV techniques and employing kind of steady cams throughout, and then letting characters move and interact around the cameras, which made it feel very real. Like you were watching. Glazer quoted Big Brother in this, you know, it felt like you're watching the Big Brother house. Like they're just kind of living their lives and the cameras are just there, omnipresent. And they used natural lighting as well, so it made the production feel really authentic throughout, which and unflattering as well. But it made you feel like you were there with these people and living in this horror. And of the two movies I discussed, One Life is probably the easier watch of the two, and it'll have a higher ratio of audience leaving it satisfied and moved. But I also enjoy bold cinema, and Zone of Interest for me swings a lot, but it hits with its intent a lot. It's disturbing. It's a jarring cinema experience, as any visit to Auschwitz should be, while also never needing to kind of needle the audience with horrific and kind of upsetting imagery to make its point. It was confident. It told the story as Glazer wanted it to be told. And for me, it hit home fully, but it is dividing audiences. So Tom, I know you've seen Zone of Interest too. What were your thoughts on it?
That's oh man, you've made it tough for me here, and I'll say why. Because this is a film that I found challenging in a few ways. First of all, it was challenging in that it wasn't necessarily what I expected it to be. I think that's kind of a common complaint because you know, it's based on a novel by Martin Amis, and when you hear the story, you're kind of expecting certain things out of it, I think. And it's one that, out of all the Oscar nominees, it's one that I need to see again, because I feel like I didn't really understand it in a certain way. And again, I love that there is cinema out there that is challenging. I love that this is kind of a risk comparative to so many kind of Holocaust stories. It feels like something that, you know, first of all, it showed remarkable restraint, as you've said, like, and that's incredibly important. But I was just kind of surprised at, I suppose, the lack of story. I didn't necessarily understand what it was trying to say, and I know that there is the obvious kind of idea of, you know, the banality of evil, as you said as well, to use the kind of to use the phrase we can't escape when we're talking about a film like this, and kind of how, I suppose, you know, quote unquote regular people can kind of act in times of trauma or when horrible things are happening, and how, you know, I suppose to a certain degree, maybe, you know, the idea that this sort of reality or this kind of evil isn't something that people just, you know, kind of can just fall into, I suppose, to a certain degree, and go about, and how would you react if you were in this situation, that kind of thing. I just found there was a real kind of lack of urgency to it, and a lack of, I don't want to say a lack of progression, but it felt to me like it was just letting you soak in the atmosphere, and that was certainly horrifying. I mean, I saw this nominated for one of the categories for sounds in the Oscars, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, of course it is.
Yeah.
Like, the sound in it is horrifying. Like, we were genuinely, there was times where I was sitting in the cinema and I was like, am I hearing something in my head? Am I hearing something in the screen next door to me, or is it actually something as horrifying as what's going on over the garden wall, so to say, in the film? But I also just didn't fully. It's hard to put into words. I love a film like this because it is challenging its viewer. It's not the easy story that it could be of, this is the person who lived next to Auschwitz. Here's how horrible Auschwitz is. Look at, there's a lot of interesting restraint and choices that Jonathan Glazer has made here. But I didn't. I mean, it's strange to say I didn't love it, because that's, I don't think you can necessarily love a film like this. It's more that you can appreciate it and really like it. I think it's a film that's going to be studied a lot in film studies courses, and possibly even maybe on the Leaving Cert here in Ireland and things like that. But it's one that I still am not sure where I land in it. There's so many things I found very remarkable. I thought there was some very interesting creative choices, especially towards the ending, without saying too much. But I feel like there wasn't necessarily any kind of driving urge to tell this story. There wasn't anything that I learned coming out of it. There wasn't really anything that I feel I had a better understanding of, aside from the nature of evil. And I think that's something that's kind of hard to grapple with. And I don't feel I necessarily got something new out of it.
Yeah.
But again, it's probably out of all the Oscars, I think there's only one Oscar nominee I haven't seen now of all of these that I'm going to probably be talking about endlessly on other podcasts and here as well. This is probably the only one that I have to rewatch, because I'm still not entirely sure how it sits with me. And I think that's important. I think that's kind of the point of the film. How do people react to this? How should you feel about this? And I feel like I'm still kind of grappling with it. And that says something about the complexity of the film, if nothing else. So yeah, I'm still kind of unsure, but it's definitely one, like, I put it on my list as one we should probably discuss, because it is something that definitely needs a discussion, whether you fall on the side of the New York Times or, the side of the Oscars. I think it's a very important discussion that should be had about this film.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I don't mind a film that swings and doesn't hit everything or for everyone. But I do like the bold storytelling choices that they made here. But I absolutely see how it could land flat. Like, for me, when I was watching it, I was like, there needs to be a moment of catharsis here. And I'm not going to get into plot details, but it never does give you that. You know what I mean? In the same way, you look at Schindler's List and it's horrific, but there's not a happy ending. You know what I mean? There's almost a bittersweet ending.
There's some optimism to it.
Yeah, there's optimism, and there's whereas this just puts you sitting with evil and never lets up and never gives you that catharsis there. So I absolutely see, for me, how initially that felt unsatisfying, but the more I sat with it, the more, again, you're not going to love this movie, but I admire it. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, it's an important movie. And there, I think the movies that we should kind of call out in Oscar season.
Yeah. And I will say, even that aside, there's like scenes with this movie already that have really stuck with me in my head that I don't think are going to be quick to leave.
Yeah. That
really did capture the horrifying nature of the Holocaust. And again, considering, the state of the world right now, that's something definitely worth highlighting. With some of the people around. But anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No, very, very true. Let's take a total tone shift and let's discuss some of the other movies that we've seen, and let's ease it back up. Let's talk Mean Girls, because the complete opposite of the zone of interest, because a lot of us were really kind of confused when it was announced that Tina Fey would be kind of rebooting her beloved noughties comedy Mean Girls with an adaptation of the musical, which is based on the movie. So the question really was, going into that, could it justify itself? And for me, I watched it and there was a lot to like in this. I thought it was quite a fun experience. Tina Fey and Tim Meadows being back, even if they're kind of just repeating the same jokes they made 20 years ago. But again, they're so funny and nice and likable that you can't be mad. I thought some of the recasts were really good. Like, for me, John Hamm kind of embracing his inner Ryan Gosling, where it's like, I do comedy now. I thought that was perfect as the kind of pedophilic PE teacher. There were other bits that didn't land for me, like Jenna Fisher being the the behind the times mom. That's crazy for me. She's still quite young in my eyes. And then you've got Mahia Lam, who comes across as kind of doing a really poor Rajiv Sasendra impersonation as the head mathlete, and it's just like, I don't get who you are. I don't get why you fit in 2024. I don't get why your character is. But I did like it a lot. I thought some of the songs were really fun, particularly I like the Halloween viral TikTok where my favorite line was, "I can be a doctor and cure some sexy cancer." So that's the tone that you're going for here. And Tina Fey knows how to. She knows how to get a laugh. Do you know what I mean? So again, you're going to get a laugh out of some of the things here. And the floor is going to be high, and it's going to be a fun couple hours of the movies. I'd have liked to have seen a bit more bite and direction though to really understand why they wanted to bring what's essentially a really recent movie back into the cinema, like rather than just rewatch it. Was it a kind of piss take of the old one? Was it an update to ask what it would be like in 2024, or was it kind of a balls to the wall musical? And it tried to do all of the above in different ways, but didn't really commit to any, so it doesn't fully succeed at any either. I think it's one that fans of Mean Girls are going to love, and they can feel justified into it. It's essentially bonus content that isn't terrible, which is what you want when a movie you love gets remade. But I'll probably never watch this again because there's just so many alternatives that could be better. Like if I'm looking for the best modern high school comedy, I'll watch Bottoms. Again, that was absolutely phenomenal. If I want a proper remake of a classic that I kind of enjoyed when I was kind of a teenager coming of age, along similar themes, not a movie, but a TV show, I'll watch the Saved by the Bell reboot. I think that's excellent and very underrated. Needs to be talked out more. And if I want to watch Mean Girls, I can literally just watch the original, and it is a better movie. But it didn't fail. It didn't suck for me. Tom, what were your thoughts on Mean Girls?
Yeah, I would kind of land in a very similar camp, I would say. Again, I think we all had the same idea of like, why are they doing this? And then it was like, oh, it's because it's a musical. Oh, why are they hiding the fact it's a musical? Which was kind of weird. And it is very strange because, as you say, like Mean Girls is a very, comparatively, a recent movie. And it's also the case where the musical was only opened on Broadway like 6 years ago. And normally when we see a Broadway film or musical adapted into film, it's at the end of its run. So I think there was a lot of kind of head scratching about this, and like it was meant to go to streaming originally, and I think that's one criticism. I think it kind of shows. It does just unfortunately seem a little cheap at times. I didn't think the choreography or the staging of the musical numbers was that impressive. It felt a little bit flat at times, but I will still say it was a lot better than I expected it to be. What absolutely saves this is the cast, which, I mean, they had an unenviable job doing this. Like, I mean, that cast of the 2004 one, they're iconic now, and they're full of Oscar nominees at this point as well, and winners as well. You know, so it's like, or maybe winners. I don't know. I can't remember the Oscars. Who remembers the Oscars the year after that? Let's be honest. But like, you know, Angourie Rice's Katie Heron, I thought she did a really good job of kind of showing kind of, I suppose, the corruption of Katie, possibly even better than Lohan. I thought Renee Rapp as Regina was just a star. Like, she is going places. It was really impressive. And another person who was sneaky good, I thought Avantika as Karen was really hilarious.
Yeah.
Where not my eyes are just like, what's going on there? What is she doing? And it's just hilarious. Like, the music, I thought, again, hit or miss. There was maybe two songs I liked. I liked the Halloween sexy song, which is what you were on about as well. And I also really liked Janice's song, kind of Raise Your Right Finger or whatever it was, with Ollie Carvalho sang, which was really good. Aside from that, you know, I was going to say exactly what you said, which is, will I ever watch it again? Probably not. But if someone was like, I haven't seen it, and I like Mean Girls, yeah, I should check it out. But again, it's not as funny as the original. The songs aren't going to be as catchy as most musicals, but you know, as a fun little diversion, it's not bad. It's a lot better than it could be. I would say if you're looking for something to watch, you couldn't go far wrong watching it once at least.
I think a movie that we're definitely going to be watching again. I really enjoyed this, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Is The Holdovers, which, just before you get into it, I would have really liked to watch at Christmas because it's a Christmas movie, and for whatever reason, we had to watch it in January with the release schedule over here. At exactly the point that we want to stop thinking about Christmas. But that's not the movie's fault. That's marketing and everything else that comes with it. So, Tom, I want to check in with yourself, and I want to get your thoughts on the Holdovers. How did you find it?
Yes, you did have to watch it in the post Christmas season, but I got to see it before
Are
Christmas.
you bastard?
The film festival, I was lucky enough to see it. The Cork Film Festival showed it in like end of November.
Nice.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've seen it twice though. I watched it when it came out again. It is such a joy to watch, man.
Yeah.
Like it's a film that made me nostalgic for a time I was never in, and
Yeah.
had such a classic rich 70s-ness to it. The performances are so good, especially from that trio. I mean, this is probably the best Paul Giamatti role of his career. And I mean, considering it's Paul Giamatti, that's really impressive. Davine Joy Randolph was outstanding as well. I mean, that's a character that, like, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, I guess she's a main character at the start. And then she really sucks you in. There's a few scenes, especially after a kind of Christmas party, that's just so outstanding. Where like, there we go. That's her nomination right there. Dominic Sessa, just total unknown. What a great find. I was like, this must be a guy who's got a million credits I've never seen. No, this is his first film role from what I'm reading. It's like amazing. I don't know, and I know the criticisms of it, and I think what's really good is when I saw this first in November, I can't remember, it was either out in America just about, or it was like having a slow rollout. And there was kind of a bit of a backlash starting to it. People were like, oh, it's very simple, it's very obvious. And I was like, that's kind of a shame. And I watched it and I was like, that's certainly a case, but like I was still so engrossed in these characters. This feels like a real situation. It feels like these characters are real, and watching them grow and develop is so rewarding and interesting. And considering the fact that it is a little bit obvious, it gets away with it because it is so sweet and wholesome, even when it's really sad and bitter. I mean, there's so many lines I think I'm just going to be quoting from this film. Like one from the start of it, because I'm not going to go into spoilers, is one where he says, I thought all the Nazis were hiding in Argentina. I just burst my ass laughing at that. It's amazing. I think it's such a feel-good film. It's one that I definitely think I'm going to be throwing on Christmas going forward. I think this is one of Alexander Payne's best films, and he's got an amazing filmography to begin with. But yeah, no, this is one that, like, I was so overjoyed when it got nominated for Best Picture this year, because it's like, man, I think it deserves it. It's a nice alternative, and it's one of those films that, like, since it's kind of lighter than a lot of the films, a lot of times that's one of the few benefits of the Golden Globes, is they have like comedy and musical. So I was like, man, it could easily get pushed out of the Best Picture nominees, but it didn't. No, and I think it's one that I think you could recommend to a lot of people, and everyone gets something out of it. It's a feel good movie, even when it's not feel good. It gets you there in the end where you're just happy to have watched it. It's really a joy to watch these characters. And again, perfect for Christmas. Unfortunately, they brought it out in January. I don't know why.
Amazing stuff. I'll definitely be throwing it on into my Christmas rotation. I'm glad we've got an actual classic movie you can throw on at Christmas, because I think that's where it is. And for what it's worth, we're going to talk Oscars and we're going to have our proper predictions next month. But if there's one movie, like if you see stuff like, Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon kind of eat each other's lunch and kind of take votes away from each other, if there's one movie that is in line for a Coda style run towards Best Picture, it could be this, like, because this is a movie that I don't think I've heard anyone dislike it. And there's a good reason for it. For those who don't know, by the way, around the plot and stuff like that, it's a movie about kind of losing and also never having. It explores kind of the relationship that forms when Paul Giamatti's grumpy, lonely professor is left babysitting children who are left behind in boarding school over Christmas, particularly Dominic Sessa's wild child, Angus. I very much thought it was almost like, now, this obviously wasn't intentional. There was nothing to this, but it was like an FU to Paul Thomas Anderson's The Voice of Licorice Pizza, which for me, like, it was a mic drop moment. It's like, that's how you make a 1970s cinema vibe. That's how you do it. Which I thought Licorice Pizza did, but it was very kind of try hard. You know what I mean? It was going for it. Whereas this was very natural. It just felt like we were watching a great 70s movie that had just passed us by here, without having to ever try hard or kind of do any gimmicks or stunts. Alex Payne kind of deployed that familiar kind of grainy footage that we're used to. It kind of takes you back to the type of hidden gem that you'd click into, like if you're flicking around the TV late at night at 2 a.m. and you just happen across this on Channel 4 and you're like, this movie is amazing. How do I not know about it? And then you've got kind of just the retro kind of graphics at the start of the movie and stuff like that as well. You talked about the performances. I liked Davine Joy Randolph. I thought she did well. I thought, like, it's particularly in an Oscar season, she did all of the Oscar things to deserve kind of her nomination, and more than likely she seems like the one nailed on actor to win her category. But for me, I thought this was Giamatti and Sessa's show here, as they had the biggest kind of hills to climb, the biggest arcs to overcome, and the range they needed to tap into throughout. Giamatti in particular is wonderfully steadfast as the kind of, like, again, we like pro wrestling, and again, it's one of those things where like the best heels, and not to say that he is a heel, particularly as the movie kind of progresses, because he has a nice arc, but the best heels are the people who believe thoroughly what they say. And he believes in his biases so hard, even the ones that are wrong or offensive, that you almost go with him. You're almost like, yeah, you've made the case and convinced me. It reminds me of like Reservoir Dogs when they have the tipping scene and Steve Buscemi makes the point so thoroughly. You're like, I think I agree with him now. But it's brilliant. The film is kind of really interested though in kind of rounding out all of its characters instead of kind of ever leaning into archetypes. Like, it's not a high school movie, even though it's set in a high school with high school kids, you know. It fleshes everyone out with a kind of soft, gentle strokes and never ever feels exploitative or awards bait. And that's the one thing that I feel like it never feels like it's trying to push and pull you. If anything, and the reason I'm a bit tepid on praising Davine Joy Randolph, she is the one person who I felt did kind of try to exploit me and make me feel emotional, whereas I felt that the beats that I got and the move, like how I was moved by Giamatti and Sessa was much more natural, and I thought it was much more soft strokes. Meanwhile, the script itself is kind of gentle but devastating. Like the one line, and again, I love scripts like this where one line just tells you so much about a character. Like one character says to another, where it's like, you can't even dream a whole dream, can you? It was amazing. It was phenomenal, and captures so much in so few words. Definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's a nice movie. It's not challenging. Go watch this now and add it to your Christmas rotation. It's great.
And can I just say another way they really messed up not releasing this for Christmas was because I liked a few things about the holdovers before Christmas. I got some glorious tweets coming up to Christmas saying things like, leave out a glass of Jim Beam and a copy of Meditations for Paul this Christmas Eve. I was like, oh, I will. But yeah, no, a joy to watch, absolutely.
Amazing. Tom, I have a question that I need to ask here because I feel like I'm being gaslit here by the entire planet, who are gaslighting me into thinking that Priscilla isn't terrible. I want to talk about this. I've got to get this off my chest. Again, maybe it's because Sofia Coppola's directing it and everyone's like, she can't direct bad movies. The adaptation of kind of Priscilla Presley's autobiography tries to be this like awards level epic. What for me fails badly to hit the mark. On paper, there's kind of a great ballsy, and I went in wanting to like this movie, and I think that's why I was so annoyed when I didn't. There's a ballsy movie here that kind of challenges the mythology of Elvis, which is one we only kind of celebrated only a couple of years ago with Baz Luhrmann and Austin Butler's biopic. And the story of how he kind of groomed Priscilla from the age of 14 is a fascinating one that many may not be familiar with. And even if you were familiar with the story and kind of the headline figures behind it and so on, seeing it play out should challenge how you feel about him. So again, I'm a big fan of that plot. The problem for me that's unforgivable here is that the movie seems to suffer from any kind of narrative vision or any kind of point to make about that. Instead, Coppola seems to be content. She seems to think that, right, I'm just going to put Elvis on screen. I'm going to put this juicy story. I'm going to put two strong leads with Jacob Elordi and Kaylee Spanny on here. Who, by the way, Kaylee Spanny probably never wants to wear a wig again after this movie. And I think they just thought that it would just sell itself. Instead, what I found it was bit of a highlight reel more than anything else that suffers from a kind of lack of narrative connective tissue and struggles to flow or connect to either of its characters. Like, despite you being taken into their room, their bedroom, you're given an all access pass to like Elvis's life. That should be fascinating, but you actually never feel like you know Elvis or Priscilla better. Like, what did he want or what did he get from this relationship besides just being a bit controlling? And what kept her there beyond the fact that he was Elvis? I feel these are basic questions to ask, and the movie really didn't have any interest in telling us. It just showed us more things. Meanwhile, there were just open goals for me left right on the table here. Like, Lisa Marie is in this movie and they don't mention her once. And that feels mad, because when you think about this story that they're trying to tell, and you think about who Lisa Marie ended up marrying, Michael Jackson, for anyone who doesn't know, like even not mentioning her name, like even just saying her name. I'm not saying you have to make it really obvious and you have to go, I wonder if she's going to marry someone who will groom people. You don't have to do that, but like you could just say her name and kind of make us think that. But it just didn't have that. It's just like, oh, she's there. I had to look up on my phone. I'm like, is that Lisa Marie? Yeah, fuck, that's Lisa Marie. And what I'm discussing here is how I spent the movie, imagining ways that it could have been better or worked for me instead of just bumbling like a narrative daddy long legs through a series of scenes from their lives without any kind of objective structure or momentum until the film just ends. It just ends. I haven't seen or heard any buzz or discussion or awards discussion about this since its release at the start of the month, but it got really favorable reviews upon release. And I think, is that a sign that like the world kind of, politely applauded for this, but then it's not really good or hasn't really landed? Or am I missing the mark, Tom? I don't know. What were your own thoughts on Priscilla? Am I being way too harsh on it?
I would say it was a lot more positive than you on it, certainly. I don't think it's quite as good as people are saying. Certainly. I think again, the people like balance. And I feel like again, you can't talk about this movie without talking about Baz Luhrmann's Elvis from a few years back. Because that was the kind of the big boozy, over the top spectacle. It was over the top, and of course, that's a Baz Luhrmann film in a nutshell. Whereas this is basically a Sofia Coppola film in a nutshell, where it's kind of a slightly kind of possibly damaged young woman trying to make her way in the world, and all of a sudden she gets swept up into this big thing. And I feel like there's a lot of positives in this. I do kind of agree to a point that there's not really a clear idea of some of the answers of like, for example, I don't feel we really got to know Elvis, and I kind of feel like that's the film is trying to make a point of that, of like how well did she know Elvis. And again, like the kind of thing of him being constantly, it feels like he's constantly a presence in her life even when he's not there, and that's kind of pointed to him being kind of controlling. Like there's scenes where you really see that she doesn't get to leave Graceland. She's just kind of at some points not even able to leave the bedroom, and it does feel kind of claustrophobic to the point where you can kind of see her perspective of what a relationship with this man would have been like, that he is controlling, that she doesn't really have a way out. And I think to a certain degree, a lot of people are probably going to be disappointed that they didn't kind of come out and out say that he was this and that, and they kind of are more like make your own assumption of it. And I mean, that's easy because it's pretty clear what we would call him now. What we should be calling him in general is that he groomed this young woman, like, and there is a lot of other debate. I mean, I think the point you made about the Lisa Marie and Michael Jackson one is an interesting point that I hadn't heard before. Because again, Lisa Marie, it's like, hey, I have a baby, and that's kind of it. And it is worth pointing out Lisa Marie was very outspoken about this film. She was not a fan of the depiction of her father in general, so I don't know if that played a factor at all. Who knows? Now Priscilla seems to have been a lot more positive about it, because of course it's based on her own memoir, like. But I think like it's a very stripped down and naturalistic film, and I think it works best as a kind of a companion piece to Elvis. But again, that's not excusing it as a film in general. I do think the performances are quite good. I did like Kylie Spenny in the role, even though it does feel like she's kind of lost in her own film at times. It feels like she's never kind of proactive, and I think that's kind of the point, because without going into where this goes, I mean, look, it's based on a real story. We know obviously eventually she leaves Elvis. That's all I'm going to say, because that's real life, right? But I think that's kind of the point, in that we're meant to see her as like, oh, this is someone who wasn't assertive, or she was under the thumb of her parents, then she was under the thumb of an older man, and it took her long enough to build up the courage to eventually walk out. And I guess that's meant to be the triumphant moment. And I guess they were kind of seeing a bit more of her kind of develop over the course of the film, and that's what worked with that performance. But I do kind of feel why people might say that it's not the most commanding performance or the most showy performance. And I think people will say the same thing of Jacob Elordi's Elvis. He is very, subdued at times, and then psychotic at other moments. And to a certain degree, he's like, that's probably what Elvis might have been like in his quieter moments. He like controlling, not like the always on, like over the top showman. Possibly just kind of controlling and wanting his own way. And when things don't go his way, and he gets everything he wants in his professional life, maybe when he gets back to home and his personal life and he doesn't get what he wants, he would fly off the handle. I think it's a film that had a lot of potential. I'm not sure it always reached that potential. And I think it's kind of the thing is, is it a story worth telling outside of the kind of gross aspect of he was a groomer? He took a child at an age where it was totally wrong to do so, and wasn't a good husband when she was of age. But the question of, is that a story worth telling? I don't know. Based on this film, possibly not. I do think it's a lot better than you think, but I also don't think it's as good as the critics say. So I kind of land somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I would say, like, again, possibly as a companion piece, Elvis, it worked. Regardless of that, I mean, like, the big kind of question mark is why is none of Elvis's music is in it, which is going to put a few people off as well. So yeah, it's one I would say that the generation who loved Elvis might like it. I was never that generation. I was never a big Elvis fan as much as I like Baz Luhrmann's film. I think it's one that you should watch, but I don't think it's one that is really as mind-blowing as people are going to say. And I think the fact that it's not really showing any presence in a lot of the awards categories is probably indicative of that. I think people wanted to like this film more than they actually probably did.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about a movie that I haven't seen, so I want you to bring me across. I haven't heard much about it at all, so tell me what you thought about The Beekeeper.
Oh my God. So The Beekeeper. Oh, this is why I love January, because you get weird stuff like this and it actually kind of works sometimes. So The Beekeeper is Jason Statham as a beekeeper. Now, listen, he's both a beekeeper, like an actual beekeeper, and part of a secret organization called the Beekeepers, okay?
Yeah.
This is such a strange film because it does every single thing to make the bad guys unlikable, to the point of they're practically tying damsels to the train lines, like. And it's so over the top. They're like, they're scamming old ladies. Blah. You know, it's ridiculously over the top and overly dramatic. This is the most extra film I've ever seen. And what is great about it is, like, you know, I can take or leave Jason Statham films, because let's be honest, sometimes they're rubbish. This was one where I went to and be like, all right, I'll give it a go. And it was one of the best times I had at the cinema in January.
No way.
Because it is so stupid, but it knows exactly what it is. It's just like, what do we do? Jason Statham needs to kick people's ass. Okay. The funniest thing about this is there's never any moment where he feels even the slightest bit vulnerable. This is the closest I have gotten in years to, like, an old school 80s Arnold film. It reminded me of Commando. Like, yes. That's the comparison I'm making, right? Whereas literally, he'd be like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to burn this place to the ground. And then everyone's like, you can't do that. And he's like, hoopa, hoopa. And then he just does it anyway. There's a moment in this where there's a SWAT team and they're surrounding a building. And they're like, okay, keep an eye out for this guy. No one can get through. And I'm not even joking. This is not exaggeration. He walks into the middle of the SWAT team. They've literally circled him. And he's like, well, I reckon I'll go in that door and I'll do this. And they're like looking at him for age, and they're like, hey, stop that guy. He kicks the shit out of him, goes up there, does whatever. Nobody can stop this man. The funniest thing is he's part of this big organization, and everyone that knows about this secret organization is like, oh, you've messed up now. You've messed up Josh Hutcherson, who's like the most douchey, swarmy villain in this, that, like, again, is so manipulative for you to hate. They're like, you messed up. And then they're like, okay, well, I've sorted it. Don't worry, we're going to get one of his own after him. And you're like, oh, he's in trouble now. No. No, he's not in trouble. It's totally grand. He, like, killed one person, and then they're like, actually, we won't bother going after him again. And also, you might be like, oh, I guess, like, I was waiting for, like, the beekeeping theme to come into it. Like, oh, maybe, like, he's learned to be a beekeeper, because the whole metaphor is like, oh, you see, bees in the colony, they're a certain way. Oh, and I'm expecting all the beekeepers to love bees. Nope. Seemingly, he's the only one that's obsessed with bees and also a beekeeper. Like, the closest it gets to, like, having any meaning is like when he kills something, he's like, I'll do it for the hive. I'm like, okay. And also, can I just say, I'm not going to spoil this because it's a moment that needs to be appreciated. When you see how high up the conspiracy goes, you can't do anything but just say, all right, they know exactly what they're doing. It's hilarious how high up the conspiracy, how interconnected this whole thing is. And also, you see how high up it goes in the world and how interconnected it is. And it doesn't make his job any harder. He could take on anyone. It's like he's taking on the whole military and the whole world at one point. And he's just, what's he got? He's got his fists and sometimes a gun. It's amazing. It is like the ultimate guilty pleasure movie so far. It is a David Ayer film who directed Suicide Squad. And it's like, yeah, he's out of movie jail as far as I'm concerned. It's actually been a big hit. It's made over 100 million. So I would watch so many of these. I would watch The Beekeeper 2, the Buzz is Back, whatever the fuck they want to give it to me. It's just, it's such trash. It's so fun. Oh my god, I enjoyed it. Yeah, everyone should watch it, man. It's like, it's like, you know what it is? It's a perfect Sunday movie.
Okay.
Like where it's like it's rainy outside, throw this on, you're going to have a good time with it. It's if you're in the right mindset, like you're like, no, I'm not going to say like this is like John Wick. This is like the stupid John Wick for idiots. But it's so,
John Wick
but
for dummies.
and like as if John Wick was a high intellectual bear. Like it's gas. It's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Okay, amazing. You've sold me completely on it. I need to go out of my way to see The Beekeeper ASAP. Amazing stuff. I'm just like, also as well, sneaky worth mentioning, like your Jason Statham is phenomenal, but there's still a hint of Cork in there. So
Yeah, yeah.
like, it's just
Oh,
like,
can I? Oh, speaking of accents, by the way, I don't know, is he meant to be playing American or some point? But like, he's going around like his usual, like, oh yeah, but I'll go over here, and no one's gonna stop me. And then when our lead detective character goes, "There's a hint of British Isles in your accent." Really? Is there, love? Oh yeah, Jesus. Wow, amazing detective work. Wow.
You've got me. Last movie we're going to discuss for this month is one that I definitely think people should go out of its way. Although for me, it wasn't the movie that it was advertised to be. That is All of Us Strangers. It wasn't a movie that I went in expecting to see. And again, it was one of these movies that I'm like, I'm going to like this movie, so I'm going to keep away from everything and just go in and watch it fresh and watch it kind of, without the influence of marketing. But you know what? That's a really good thing. I think most people went in kind of expecting it to be this kind of queer tour de force love story that's centered on Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal. And there is a bit of that in there, but it's more of a kind of psychological character drama and a bit of a ghost story as well. And even when I'm talking to people since seeing it, I saw it just on Monday past. And talking to a couple of people, I'm like, yeah, it's not a love story. There is a bit of that, but it's more of a ghost story. And people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? But what I admired most about this was that seems like a bit of a head fuck, but it really wasn't, because it was really effortless how Andrew Haig, who wrote and directed, made this high concept adaptation of the 1987 novel Strangers so simple and easy for the audience to understand. It should be complicated when you look at it on paper. You see Andrew Scott's character trying to juggle reconciling his past traumas with his now deceased parents, along with the emptiness of his day-to-day existence, and a burgeoning new relationship with Mescal, though. But in practice, as soon as there's a scene, and I won't get into the plot at all, but like there's a scene where the penny drops. Oh, this is how they're going to handle it. Oh, and you get it straight away and you never look back. And they never overcomplicate it and never make it like sci-fi or anything like that, or time travel messy or anything. It just makes sense the way the Haig handles it. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's really fluid. It's so simple. So you can instead focus on the kind of powerful healing conversations that happen throughout the movie, as it operates as a sort of, the only thing I could think of was like an elongated chair work therapy session. That it kind of felt like. It places In doing so, it places a lot of work on the cast, and it was really interesting. It's one of these movies that I didn't think about until the credits rolled, but I'm like, there was only 6 actors in that movie. Like, it feels almost like a COVID movie, at times as well, but you don't realize that because it's so rich in character. There's so much weight on the cast shoulders, but fortunately they're more than up to the task. You have the parents, Claire Foy and Jamie Bell, who are both every single parent of that era, kind of warm, but they have hidden complexities and biases that kind of sit with that era, while also being totally distinct and unique characters in themselves. Then you've got Mescal, meanwhile, who again is sneakily like kind of not a big deal in this movie, but what he does, he delivers. He's extremely subtle but effective as Strong's lover, even if his character is kind of tangential to the plot itself. But it's Scott who carries this movie on his back. He is phenomenal. I talked to someone the other day who's not a huge Andrew Scott fan, and like their argument against it was he doesn't have range. And I'm like, watch this movie. I'm like, watch this movie and tell me he doesn't have range. Like, I get it. He's Andrew Scott and he's Andrew Scott in everything he does, but like he's every aspect of Andrew Scott imaginable in this movie, and he is phenomenal. It's a performance that all of us are going to kind of connect to on some level. We've all been at him at some stage of our lives, even if the specifics of the circumstances differ. He's at all times trying to be giving the impression of togetherness, like for others, while he's also kind of searching for healing. And then at the same time, he's totally vulnerable. He plays about 15 different iterations of this character in the movie, and it's all fascinating. I love this movie But I will give kind of a warning on it. Don't be surprised if you go in expecting this epic love story, which is why I'm kind of positioning it in this way, and end up leaving a little bit traumatized, sad, and a bit misled by what you actually get. And that isn't Haig's fault. It's more how the movie was marketed. He told the story that he meant to excellently, and you can feel how personal this is to him. There's a couple of great interviews where he talks about kind of how he didn't write it with any actors in mind. He just wanted to connect himself to the plot and how he'd retell his story. But it is worth noting, and I get why the marketing team are like, oh yeah, it's basically Brokeback Mountain, but with like these two sexy Irish actors. You know what I mean? I get it. But it's not that movie. And for me, it was all the better for not being that movie because we've seen that before. What were your thoughts on All of Us Strangers?
Yeah, this is actually an interesting one. Again, don't worry, I'm not going to ever mention the Cork Film Festival again because because I saw
It's a good festival.
that there won't be any mention again until next year. Okay, but yeah, this was also one I saw when it was at the film festival. I haven't seen it since. I was hoping to see it last weekend, but I wasn't able to. So I'm basing it on what I thought in November, and I'm just going to say something that the director said in the intro to the film. He did like a video intro, and I think it's because it's interesting. A lot of people are confused about what this film is, and I'm going to get to what you said in a sec because I definitely agree with it. And he basically says the film is basically like, what if you could have a conversation with your parents at the age you are now when you're both the same age? And I was like, that's really interesting. And when I saw that, I was of the same opinion you. I bought tickets to this because I didn't want to know what it was about. I just knew Andrew Scott, Paul Mescal were in love in it or whatever. I was like, oh, relationship drama, cool. It's not that. It's that, or it is that, but it's so much more. This is such. I think it's a really great film, and I would say what you said as well of feeling maybe shortchanged initially is absolutely how I felt when I first started watching the film and realized it wasn't that. I didn't know how to feel. I had to sit with me for a while, and now I think it was one of my favorite films I saw last year. There's a lot of deep stuff in here for a film that is in many ways so shallow. It is a very human story and it's a very simple story, but it's all about trauma and grief and how things that kind of maybe happen in your past can affect your future and your relationships in general. It's got a really cool soundtrack in a good way. I think Always on My Mind is one that a lot of people are going to single out based on this. It's been used in marketing as well, but it's something that really kind of becomes haunting as you watch the film. I think it's got a real underrated cinematography to it as well. Like, it's a very simple film, the way it looks. There's a lot of shots where it's a static camera, but like some of the weird lighting in it, there's really trippy visuals at times that kind of adds to the unreality of some scenes in the movie. There's some horrific cinematography at one scene where I was genuinely like, oh my God, this is something that we all see with our eyes normally. But all of a sudden I was like, oh, like with the distortion of a mirror just made it horrifying. And yeah, it's one that can't help but kind of make you feel really emotional and sad, in I suppose a nice way, but also kind of make you grateful for what you have in your life as well. The performances are amazing. I mean, obviously our two leads of Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, amazing. Especially they have such great chemistry, and I agree with Andrew Scott. In that I haven't necessarily seen a lot of Andrew Scott, to be honest. I've seen him in the Bond film. I've seen him in as Moriarty, but I haven't seen like Fleabag, which was a big one for him. I haven't seen him in a lot of other stuff. So here I was like, oh man, this is a guy who should be like lead in a lot more movies, because it feels like he kind of is someone who can have big supporting roles or can have big lead roles in maybe a TV series, but you never see him in like a kind of a role this prominent, in films. So I was delighted to see him in this, and yeah, he absolutely was outstanding in it. And it's a shame this got totally kind of locked out of the Oscars, which was really a surprise. I could have seen it get a best adapted screenplay nod at the very least. But yeah, these are great performances that I worry will be overlooked now because of the lack of awards attention. But yeah, it's a great one. I also will say, if you're a big fan of Scrubs, this might remind you of one particular episode. I'm not going to say anything else, but when you see the movie, it might make more sense. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. But yeah, no, this is a great one. Definitely one we're checking out. I will challenge you. Again, go in as blind as you can, because that was the way I experienced it, and it's the best way you can appreciate this one, I think. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute there.
Okay.
We mentioned this getting locked out of the Oscar race, and we're at that time of year where we're in award season, silly season for many reasons, because again, Look, I just want to put this out there. Awards are silly by default. You know what I mean? They are made to essentially look, they give us chances to put celebrities in rooms. They give us chances to get headlines and stuff like that as well. We had the Golden Globes take place. We saw the host, whose name escapes me at the moment. He absolutely died on stage. Poor chap. I actually felt for him. But like then you had the Timothy Chalamet and Kylie Jenner show as well. Like that's why we watch award season, for like the goss, the scandal, and this and that and the other. So again, like, look, we'll take that into account. But when we get down to the awards, they are inherently silly. They are more designed to piss us off, apparently, at kind of certain things, than to actually, you know, honor the movies that they're supposed to honor a lot of the time. So what we're gonna do is, obviously, we're going to have February at the movies. That's going to come out just before the Oscars. So we're going to save our Oscar predictions for then. And we're going to give you kind of our tips for what's going to succeed and what's not. What we're going to do now is we're going to have our Oscar rants to finish the show. And we're going to talk about what's pissing us off about this year's Oscars, and what has actually got up our skin. I did this last year where I kind of spoke about how the Banshees of Inisherin had totally eaten the Quiet Girl's dinner. Wasn't nearly as good a movie, but again, like, kind of, there's always one thing we want to get pissed off about. I'm going to get us kicked off here with this one, and I'm going to rant just about the Oscars and their status as the most prestigious award ceremony on the planet in general. That needs to end, okay? We need an international equivalent to this, because it is ridiculous at this stage when you look at what they do. And no, I'm not talking about let's pay more attention to the usually nonsensical BAFTA awards, who kind of continue to be that weird hipster kid who's like, I like the alternative things because my tastes are really cool. No, I'm not saying we do it with the BAFTAs. I think we need to invent a brand new worldly award ceremony that's free from biases and politics and campaigns and all the things that make the Oscar season. I'm not saying get rid of the Oscars, but to make it so annoying, because that's kind of the pinnacle of movie awards. What pisses me off here is the Academy this year patting themselves on the back for nominating a whopping 2 international movies this year for Best Picture in Anatomy of a Fall and Zone of Interest. And like, I'm sorry, but this is what's infuriating for me. Hollywood, I'm just going to come out and say it, is not where all great cinema gets made. It is not even where the boundaries of cinema get pushed. And it's infuriating that it continues to sit there and pat itself on the back while almost being charitable towards much better quality and standard of movies that are pushing filmmakers outside of Hollywood, and that Hollywood are essentially co-opting the filmmakers from. And essentially at this stage, like, and there's been so many parodies made about it, and there's been so many kind of jokes made about it, but it's still the same. You know the type of movie that's going to get nominated in the Best Picture category, and it's not necessarily the Best Picture of the year. You have an actor doing something physically demanding, or you have a subject that covers either racism or persecution, or you have a sweeping biopic, or you have a director or actor who hasn't got the correct credit they deserve. And I'm just sick of it. I'm bored of it. This is fucking boring. It is the same shit over and over. The thing that makes movies boring is watching the same shit over and over. We need to get creative. And I want to look back on the past few years of my top 10 lists in this decade and see how many fall outside the typical Hollywood playbook. So we're looking at movies that are either made internationally outside of Hollywood, or are mainly star non-Caucasian prototypical Hollywood casts. So in 2023, I had 5 movies. You had Close, Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, Roy Lane, and Marcel the Shell, which she was on. In 2022, I had 7 movies. My entire top 5 could fall into this criteria. You've got Everything Everywhere All at Once, You Are Not My Mother, The Quiet Girl, or Decision to Leave, which are, by the way, that is my top 5 for the previous year. And then rounding out in the top 10, you've got A Hero and you've got Titan. And then in 2021, I had 2, which is Drive My Car and Another Round. And remember, 2021, which was on the lower end of those, was a COVID impacting year, which affected a lot of the releases. But even then, what looks like a low year for me is what the Academy considers to be a diverse one. This is what we need to be enraged about this year. We've done Oscars So White, and that did deserve to be done. We've done Time's Up, and that deserved to be done. But look, can we put pressure? Like, I think, no, do you know what? We can try put pressure. I was about to make a plea here, but I'm just like, there's no point. we could put pressure on the Academy to diversify their palettes, but at a certain stage, we just need to accept that this is Hollywood telling us who exactly they are. We need to celebrate great cinema outside of the norm, not by way of criminally undeserved, like international film category where it's just like, oh, here's all the foreign movies. Not just by packing it into that and then not giving that much publicity, but by holding award shows to task if they don't acknowledge the best movies, which is literally their one job. I'm sick of it. I'm so annoyed that the best movies aren't getting recognized. And that not only what pissed me off about this isn't just the best movies not getting recognized. That's just part of the Oscar experience. What annoyed me here is how proud the Academy are of themselves for nominating 2 out of 10 that weren't Hollywood movies. It's an absolute joke. Tom, whew, any thoughts or what your
No, I think you're dead right. And yeah, it's like about time. You know, I mean, it's always that best international feature category has always been kind of like, oh, so you can be the best film, but also, yeah, you're international. You don't get really. It's like, what's the point? It's meant to be best celebration film. And I do want to just quote a man who would know a lot better than me, Bong Joon-ho, who directed Parasite, has a quote that I loved, which I believe was when he was accepting, was it the Golden Globe? He said, "Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films."
Yes.
Boom. Said it better than I ever could, you know?
Nailed it.
Now, I
what
also
are your thoughts?
You're
What's got you
really attacking, you're really attacking the Oscars, and a part of me wants to come to the Oscars' defense.
Okay.
Because, you know, as a former Oscar winner, you know, what I want to say is this, okay, and also looking like an Oscar in real life. And I want to kind of reflect on people's anger about Barbie. Okay, now if he's like, I know we can never escape Barbie. Anytime we're talking, we're like, what about Barbie? You and me, but it's like the Joker and Batman. We're destined to do this together, you and I. Forever, you and I. So everyone's kind of annoyed about Best Director and Best Actress, Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, and I kind of feel like that's a shame. Obviously, they are the 2 primary female voices that made this film happen. But I also kind of feel like it's the 4th most nominated film this year. You know, was it really deserving? Like, not everyone can get nominated. You know, the fact that a Barbie movie is nominated for Best Picture is amazing to begin with. And I kind of feel like there's an uproar just because it's the film everyone has seen. And it's like, you know, are we really saying that she's deserving of the Best Actress nominees? There's some amazing actors in that category already. I would have liked to have seen Greta Lee for Past Lives. She's not there.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of other nominations. And it's kind of like, to those people, I just want to say, you know, see more movies. But I also, at the same point, also want to attack the Oscars because they've nominated what's clearly not a real film. Nyad. What is it called? Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, whatever it is. Okay, they're in it. Like, look, this is clearly them just going, hey, how has Annette Bening been nominated so many times and not won? I said, oh, fuck it. Was she in something? Yeah, I'll give it that one. Jodie Foster, we haven't given her an award in a while. Go on, throw her in there. That's not a real film. Come on. No one believes it. No one has seen it. It doesn't exist. You can tell me it's on Netflix, but I know what happens when you try to press it. Nothing. Doesn't work. Title not available. Absolute bollocks. Come off it. This is just this is the pretentiousness of the Oscars I can't stand. The Oscars can be pretentious in general, but I cannot stand when they just go, what's a film no one will have seen, so we look like we see every film.
Yes.
That is what this is. It's ridiculous. What is it, about a swimmer or something? Shut the hell up. Like it's so stupid. No one has any interest in seeing the film. Most of the people I've seen it have been like, yeah, it's all right. But of course they have to just be like, oh, well, oh, you haven't seen the ad. Oh, well, that's why we're the Academy. Is it? Is it really? Because you make atrocious decisions like this one. You know what? I take it back. Put Margot Robbie in there instead of fucking whoever was nominated for that film that doesn't exist. Nonsense. I mean, at the same point, they nominated Godzilla. That's pretty cool. But,
Yeah.
but other than that, get the hell out of here. This is why Oscars don't matter.
Having said that, we will be back next month to predict the Oscars because look,
the Oscars are amazing. We love the Oscars.
I like to win money on them because they are predictable. So I guess it's valuable from that standpoint. Guys, that's all the time we have for this month at the movies. Tom, next month we're going to come back and discuss all of February's releases. Is there one movie that you're particularly looking forward to? And I'm betting that it's probably the same as mine, but is
there is some good stuff in February. I will say there's a movie coming out in February I just saw last night as preview screening, and that's The Iron Claw.
Yeah,
that I'm excited to talk about,
okay.
Especially with someone who's a fan of wrestling. Although I also want to hear how people react who are not fans of wrestling because I'm really curious. I'm like, do people know this story? But aside from that, there's a kind of a car crash element. I'm kind of excited for Madam Web.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Madam Web should be interesting. I'm looking forward to the Ironclaw. And yeah, I think we'll have a lot to discuss on that. So yeah, very exciting times. Tom, you've got a lot going on over on in the Popcorn Pod world. What's going on and what do you want to plug?
Oh man, so much. So like, yeah, we've been talking about awards nonstop. All awards are stupid and pointless, but I'm the only one who puts on an award ceremony where I'm aware of that. And the award ceremony is because it's so stupid. I'm giving awards to movies that haven't even come out yet. It's a film preview. That's the joke. I'm previewing every film coming out in 2024. I genuinely say this, and I do not add bluster. This is absolutely true, and I've yet to see someone point it out. I think I do the most complete film preview there is. I am previewing over 100 films this month. It is going to hopefully be out soon once I get to editing it. Aside from that, Pop Cult Pod on all socials and on YouTube. I have more stuff coming up on YouTube very soon. And on my socials, I've started Movies and Milk, which is like short form reviews that you can find all over the place. So yeah, anywhere you see Pop Cult Pod, you're guaranteed quality, seal of approval from me.
There you
Who runs it? Surprising, right?
It is a shock. I'll back that up though. Loads of exciting stuff happening. Tom always busy and always entertaining. Next time on page 180 next week, we will have Kento back. He's going to preview the Super Bowl and we're going to catch up on all things Six Nations. But that's all we have for this month at the movies. Tom, thank you for joining us. Subscribe to Pop Cult Pod on everything if you haven't already. Always entertaining. We'll chat next month. But until then, this has been page 180. And honey, I don't know your life.